Hi, welcome to Divalicious Education. Today we're going to work on the distributive property. Now this one is going to be a really quick video only because I'm really rushing with time today, but I did promise my students that I would make them a video to help them with tonight's homework. So that being said, today we're going to work a little bit with the distributive property. What the distributive property basically says is that when you have two factors, that you can decompose one of the numbers or break apart one of the factors, and then you can multiply those factors by the other factor, and when you put the numbers back together it should equal the same product. So I'm going to show you what that looks like with a problem, and we're going to start with a simple problem. And I did this with my students today, and I told them it's not about the answer, because I obviously know it was an easy problem and they knew what the answer was. But we want to walk through the steps of what it looks like to decompose or to break apart a number, and then what it looks like to put it back together to get to the final answer or product of a problem. So we're going to start with an easy problem today. Well, let's start with 7 times 5. So when we're looking at a problem and we're wanting to use the distributive property, we can break apart one of the factors. And I told my kids, you want to be smart with the number you choose. Which one of these numbers do I want to break? Because I want to keep the one that's easier for me to count by. Most children know that it's easier to count by 5, so the number that we want to break apart or decompose is the number 7. So we want to think, when we're adding, what equation would equal 7? There are lots of different answers. My kids today came up with answers like I could do 1 plus 6, I can do 2 and 5, I can do 3 and 4. So any of those combinations work. So for our example, we're going to do 3 plus 4 because that equals 7. And we still have to remember that we're multiplying by 5. So our first step looks like this. This is what it looks like when you give my camera a second. Out of focus. This is what it looks like to decompose a number. We should still see the original problem in this step, meaning I see 7 in this problem. Where's 7? 7 is 3 plus 4. I should also see times 5, and I see it in this problem as times 5. And that's how you know that you've done the first step correctly, because you should see the numbers from the original problem in a different way here. The other thing I told my third graders today is to make sure that one of the common misconceptions that a lot of kids do on this step is they try to break apart both of the factors. I only want to break apart one of those factors. So here we've taken apart 7 and we've made it 3 plus 4, and then we've shown that we're still multiplying by 5. In my next step, what I want to do is I want to take each of these add-ins and make sure that I multiply it by the number I said I'm multiplying by. For a lot of us adults, it looks very similar to algebra because, hint, hint, that's what this is getting them ready to think about. So what I want to do is I want to take this first add-in of 3 and I want to multiply it by 5. So that's what this problem looks like. But I also have to remember I have to keep 7. So I've done the 3 of 7. I also have to do the 4 from 7. So on the other side, I have the 4, and it also needs to be multiplied by 5. So this is what the next step looks like. I take each of those add-ins and multiply it by that other factor. So now I have the problem 3 times 5 plus 4 times 5. So I see the number 7, and each piece of it is multiplied by the 5. Now from this point, most of the kids get what to do, because now that I've broken out the two problems I simply need to do the problems. I know that 3 times 5 is 15, and I know that 4 times 5 is 20, and then we can add 15 plus 20. Now some children may need to do it like a separate problem, make an algorithm, or do whatever strategy they're doing to add. A lot of kids at this point have gotten to the point where they can add it quickly. I know that 5 and 0 makes 5 in the ones place, and that 10 and 20 would make 30. So I know that 7 times 5 equals 35, which is what they should get. So I hope that you understand the problem. What we did is we had the original problem, is what we started with. The first step that we did is to break one of the numbers. So we broke one of the numbers. The next step is to multiply each part by the original factor. And then the next part is to add those answers or add those numbers back together. Okay, so those are the steps we take. We break the numbers, we multiply each of those parts by that factor, and then we add those answers back together to get the answer. So this is what the distributive property looks like. Let's try one more with a smaller number, and then we'll practice two big ones together, and that should give you enough understanding that you can get through tonight's homework or understand your distributive property. So let's work with, let's do 6 times 9. So here's our original problem of 6 times 9. So the first thing we want to do is we want to break the numbers apart. A lot of children will want to break 9 because 9 seems to be a harder problem for kids. So if we're going to break 9, we're going to keep the 6 times, and we're going to think what equals 9. Sorry. So now that we know we want to break the 9, we're going to keep 6 times, and we're going to think what will make 9. Well, one way to make 9 is 5 and 4. So we're going to break 9 into 5 plus 4. This next step says now that we've broken the numbers apart, we're going to multiply each of those parts by the factor. So this first problem would be 6 times 5. And we're going to add it to the other part, which is going to be 6 times 4. And then we're going to do each of those problems using your strategies to figure it out if you don't know it. But to make things quicker, 6 times 5 is 30. And then 6 times 4 is 24. And then we're simply going to add 30 plus 24 back together, which will give us the answer of 54. 0 and 4 make 4, 30 and 20 make 50. And that means that 6 times 9 would equal 54. Okay, good. Now let's see what that looks like with the larger number, because that's really why third graders learn it, so that they can multiply larger numbers. So we are going to work with the number, we're going to go 24 times 8. So when you're working with the larger number, it's easier to see which number I'm going to break apart. Obviously, I want to break apart 24. A lot of third graders will say you can just break it into 20, which I can. And I can add 4, and that would make 24. And I'm going to multiply by 8. So then I'm going to multiply each of those parts by this original factor. So then I should have 20 times 8, and I'm going to add it to 4 times 8. And this goes back to when we learned how to multiply with multiples of 10. I don't have to really think 20 times 8. I can really think 2 times 8, and 2 times 8 is 16. So 20 times 8 is, and ignore that parentheses, 160. And then I'm going to do 4 times 8, and 4 times 8 is 32. And then we're just going to add 160 to 32. 0 and 2 makes a 2 in the ones place. 60 and 30 makes 90 in the tens place. And 1 in the hundreds place means a 1 in the hundreds place, which gives us the answer of 192. Good. Let's try one more together, and then I'll see if you can do the challenge. So let's try to multiply 58 times 6. I seem to be stuck on 6s today. So we're obviously going to break apart the number 58. So we might want to break it into 50 plus 8. And we still need to multiply by 6. Then we're going to multiply each of those parts by a factor. So we're going to do 50 times 6. And we're going to add it to 8 times 6. And again, using our multiples of 10, we can think 5 times 6 equals 30. So 50 times 60 means I have to bump that over a place and get another 0. Makes it 300. And then we're going to add it to 8 times 6. And 8 times 6 is 48. So 300 plus 48 is 348. Here's one for you to try. Okay, so here's 27 times 4. This will be a good place for you to pause the video and see if you can use the distributive property to solve it, and then come back and let's work through this problem and see if you have the same steps, even though the way you break this number apart may be different from mine. Go ahead now, pause it, and see if you can use the distributive property. Okay, so let's work through this one. We know that we probably want to decompose 27, break apart 27. There are lots of ways you can break it, but we're going to break it into 20 plus 7. And then we're going to multiply by 4. So then when we multiply each of these add-ins by 4, you should have whatever factor you chose, whatever add-in you chose as your first number. In our case it's 20, and it should be multiplied by the number 4. And then you need to add it to your second add-in, which is 7, or whatever add-in you chose there, and you're going to multiply it by 4. Then you're going to multiply out this problem. So whatever you have here, do that problem and you should get the answer. Mine is 20 times 4, which will give me 80. And then you're going to do the same thing over here. Multiply out that problem. I have 7 times 4, which equals 28. And then I'm going to add them together. 0 and 8 make 8 in the ones place. And 80 plus 20 makes 100. So that means I have the number 108 as my answer, which means that 27 times 4 equals 108. Okay, I hope that was able to help you a little bit with the distributive property. Give it a practice tonight with homework, and I will try to get a new video. Goes a little bit slower and take a little bit more time with you if you need it, but I hope that gets you through tonight. Bye. Have a good night.